Hi, I'm Justin Boyd,
Hi, I'm Marcy Gonzalez.
and we are the Watchers in the Basement. Welcome to the Watchers in the Basement. Today, we are here to discuss Season 4, Episode 9, the penultimate episode of the HBO award-winning series Succession. The episode is titled Church and State, and like I said, it's the second to last episode ever of Succession. It's also the funeral of Logan Roy, so going in, we knew this was going to be a great episode, and I think they delivered. It's also the longest episode to date at 73 minutes, the longest runtime. Although I've read that the finale is going to be 90 minutes, so we'll look forward to that next week. It's also worth noting there was no cold open for the show.
Yep.
We got last week's stuff, and then boom, right to the theme song, and then we're off and running. So, Marcy, before we go through each character and break down the the funeral, what are your overall thoughts of this episode?
Pretty good episode. It didn't feel long until you said that it was the longest one to date. It didn't really feel that long, so that's good because the pace kept going. Probably maybe like my second favorite funeral episode of a series. I think number one still goes to The West Wing. So still a pretty solid episode. We got to see some old friends or enemies, depending on who you are. So it was good. It had obviously a lot of drama, a lot of feelings, meltdowns that we were looking for and looking forward to. But then also, again, just some added bits of comedic intertwined into the episode. So I thought it was a really good episode.
Yeah, I thought it was an amazing episode. Honestly, it is this show, and I've said this several times. To me, it's really hard to pick like what's the best Succession episode. To me, the quality level is like it's so consistent, and it's hard to say which is the best or whatever. But this one is, I think extra special given it was Logan Roy's funeral. So let's talk about that. The episode starts and the Roys are arriving at Logan's funeral amidst street protests because of they helped Minkin win, or they declared his win. It's not official yet, but it seems like it's trending in that direction. So let's just kind of set up the funeral, and then we'll get into the different characters. But at the funeral, we got to see some familiar faces, as you mentioned a little bit ago, Marcy. We got to see Carrie, which it totally makes sense why she's there, but not that I've forgotten about her, but I wasn't expecting to see her. We got to see Carrie, who was obviously Logan's most recent mistress. We got to see Marcia, his most recent ex-wife or most recent wife. We saw Caroline, the wife and the mother of the sibling, or three of the siblings. We got to see Uncle Ewan. We're going to get into that in a little bit. We got to see, of course, Mattson was there, and Jared Meakin, the new potential president or president-elect of this world. Of those characters, who do you want to touch on first?
Let's get into Carrie. It was good to see her again. She showed up. She wasn't alone. She came with kind of her own little posse as she was there with her brother, and they great casting on that. The gentleman that I guess is playing her brother, it looked like they could be related in real life. And she also brought her friend, who is an attorney, in case she had any issues getting into the funeral, which I thought, again, was a little bit of, sad to think that she was expecting to not be able to get in. But again, some of that just great, just comedic levity that was added in there when, she said, yeah, that's my friend. She's a lawyer. I brought her in case I couldn't get in. So I really like that part.
Yeah, that was great. And, she was seated, middle of the row, whatever, middle of the way back or whatever. And we have Caroline, who comes up and invites Carrie to sit with the other wives and mistresses. And she, to kind of break the ice between Carrie and Marcia, she introduces them to Sally Ann, who, as she says, that was my Carrie at the time. So you have the wives and mistresses all sitting on the same row. You've got Caroline's husband there, who is he's pretty happy to be there. He's happy to be seen.
Mm-hmm.
I did like how the kids the Sibs kind of poke fun at him. Shiv tells him, she's like, "Oh yeah, Dad, you were one of his favorites. He used to talk about you often." I did enjoy that part.
Yeah, and Caroline said he was very excited, which, people can get excited for funerals depending on how you feel about the deceased. So that was great. And also when he showed up and he was just kind of like, Daddy's here. And it's like, um, you're just like stepdaddy as of like 6 months ago. Like, let's chill it a little bit, Peter.
Right. Yeah. I think gun to their head. Like if you woke up in the middle, if you woke up the Sibs in the middle of the night, gun to their head, they couldn't name the guy. But
Yeah.
in fact, I forgot his name too. Yeah, you're right. His name's Peter. So glad he was there. Good to see a somewhat familiar face. Let's talk about cousin Greg. Cousin Greg really wants to get there. He's of course with Tom as the episode opens. His ATN is it's a busy day for ATN. The night before, obviously, they declared the election for Mencken, and there's protests all across the country. There's all kinds of things happening. So Tom is very much stressed out, and he's not going to be able to make the funeral. But cousin Greg has to get there, and so cousin Greg bikes to the funeral, which I thought was awesome. Going to this fancy funeral, he gets there, he's all sweaty in his suit and everything. But I like how Tom he mentioned that he was supposed to be a casket wheelman. In this show, in this world, these people, it's all about positioning, how you're positioning yourself. And as we see throughout the episode, once it's clear that Tom isn't going to make it, then Greg basically is like, hey, Tom asked me to be to take his spot as the casket wheelman. I'm just like, it's just so crazy how everything on this is about advancing your place in life, even at a funeral.
Yeah, exactly. Not even that, but just all of the, I guess, networking that they were doing and just kind of like politicking and everything that was going on. And that's a little bit insane, but I guess that does happen, in funerals where there's a lot of, I guess, power players or people who think they're power players there.
Right. Yeah. And one of the power players, of course, is Mencken, who arrives, and Greg wants to get an intro from Roman, and Roman, is kind of hesitant to do that. But then he says, hey, if you're on Ewan watch, if you watch your Uncle Ewan, if you keep him, or your grandpa, if you can keep him away, maybe we can trade, and I'll set you up with I'll link you up with Mencken. So, and we see how well that works out later on whenever immediately, Ewan makes a beeline to give a eulogy, and Greg tries to stop him. It's so funny because it's in front of all these people. There's like 600 people in this very fancy, downtown or Upper East Side Manhattan funeral home, and Ewan gets up there and he just completely slams his brother, like just lets Logan have it. Gives a charged eulogy, and he's talking about basically how Logan's troubled childhood kind of led into what he became, and the fact that he may have given his little sister polio, and of course his sister died from polio, so he's telling us all about that. And he kind of wraps it up by saying that his brother was mean and he was meager. And of course the siblings are just fuming because they don't want their dad to look like this. But it seems like there's a lot of truth to what Ewan said. What'd you think about Ewan's speech?
Yeah, I mean, I think he had balls to do that, right? At a funeral, you typically, however you feel or felt about the deceased, you typically try to say good things, right? But no, he got up there and he told the truth, and that is his truth, right? Like, we've got to respect his point of view. But I like what he said at the beginning when he was like chastising them for trying to keep him from going up there and eulogizing his brother just because of what like the shareholders might think, or like what it would do to the stock price or whatever. So I like that he called that out. Again, like, balls on him for being able to call that out. And like, they had a very complicated relationship. They had a complicated childhood relationship, and I think it kind of shows that you can go through hard things in life, but that doesn't mean that it has to dictate how you come out, because they grew up to be very different people, diametrically opposed siblings, right? Ewan is pretty much everything that Logan was not. So I'm glad he was able to speak his truth and just kind of lay everything out. And even if it was hard for the kids to hear, and maybe even for Marcia and Caroline and some of, Logan's former lovers to hear, it's not like any of it was not true.
Yeah.
Because I think like the sentiment was he's saying all of these things and they hurt because they're true, not because he's up there like just saying lies about our dad or whatever. So great speech by Ewan, great acting by James Cromwell. He was great. And then Greg again at the end with just some more comedic levity at the end, he was like, yeah, no, like good truths that you were saying out up there. So I think Greg always has to, ingratiate himself.
Yeah, one of the funniest lines in the episode is, you're right, whenever Ewan comes to sit back down with next to Greg, Greg's like, that was a good hard take that you gave. You're right. Greg, he just always has to like please or kiss ass or whatever, no matter what the situation is. So he was able to do that. Now I thought, but before it started, before the funeral started, I did like how Connor and Willa, they had a special eulogy, as Willa said, a formally inventive eulogy that Shiv shot down because she said it would leave them open to legal action. So what do you think was a part of this formally inventive eulogy that Willa and Connor were cooking up?
I don't know, but obviously, like knowing Willa, she's artistic, she's an actress, so it could have, been something like that. It could have been things maybe with some slander like peppered in there, and maybe that's what would open them up to like some legal ramifications. But got to love Connor and Willa for always just, I guess, maybe looking at the bright side of things, right? Like they're sad, it's a funeral, but also wanting to give Logan a really great send off. So I think solid, I guess, on their part for being able to think of that. And I guess it kind of also shows like maybe Connor is the one that's actually like processed this better than the rest of his siblings have. At least for now, like we haven't seen him have a breakdown yet. It might hit him later, like it hit Roman later. But also I don't think it's hit him yet that the election is over. So we only have one more episode, but maybe there are some lingering effects of like grief that are gonna show up for Connor, whether it's with Logan or just kind of being a loser.
Yeah, I was surprised that Connor didn't step up there to speak when the opening presented itself. And the reason why there was an opening is because it was determined before, in the end of the previous episode, that Roman was going to give the eulogy. That was it was his big energy spot. That's what he said. And this gets to really the meat of the episode. And I really wish that Tristan was here today, because last week on our episode, he totally called it. He predicted that Roman would fall apart in front of everyone. And that's exactly what happened. Roman, the episode started out and he was so high up. Like he was so confident, so cocky. He was, he's rehearsing his speech in his like beautiful apartment. He has this crazy view of New York. And, he's working on the speech and he's joking around and he's having a good time. And, everything's going his way. He's so high up. And at the end of the episode, we see that he's as low as he could possibly, well, pretty low for him. Maybe not could possibly be, but pretty low. But, like before they get to the funeral, the Sibs get together, they're in a car. And at this time, Shiv decides to tell Kendall and Roman that she's pregnant. And, as she's telling them, Roman launches into jokes about having sex with her, about how he's the father of the child, that if he ever sees her breastfeeding, he's going to like jerk off because he said it would be just too hot not to. Like, he just like is just full on Roman. And, like, just even when he gets to the funeral, before they get the funeral started, he sees Marcia. He calls her the sexy funeral lady. And then he says, and then, Kendall's just like, come on, man. Like, you got to stop. And he's like, wait until I have sex with her on dad's coffin. Like, he's just like, just he's just feeling himself. Then he goes up to Frank before it gets started. And he's like, basically kind of pitching to Frank the same way that Kendall did, except for Kendall obviously has a relationship with Frank. And he's like saying, hey, like, if this all goes down and Kendall doesn't want to be a part of this, like, I'm looking to create a posse. Like, are you interested? And you can tell Frank is is just, the opposite of interested of working with Roman, because as we saw in the, previous seasons, they've had a history of working together and didn't work out. So, let's see. But as far as the speech itself, let's talk about that, because Kendall finally, or I'm sorry, Roman finally gets up there, and he basically can't do it. When he's rehearsing by himself, he's talking about how he's going to be big and loud and everything. And then he gets up there and he's so meek, and he can barely say "my father, Logan Roy." He can barely spit out the words. What did you think about that scene? It was, to me, it was like uncomfortable. Not that I don't root for Roman, but it was a very uncomfortable scene watching him bomb in front of all these people and look so small.
Yeah, no, I mean, I thought that was a really great scene too. Really great acting by Kieran Culkin in this scene, because again, we do see at the beginning, it seemed very Shakespearean to me, right? Like Logan's in the middle of like this great soliloquy of like he's so great and he's gonna do a great job at this, at this eulogy and blah blah blah. He's so big and everything, right? Like so full of hubris. Then we see what effect Ewan's words are having on him while he is up there talking about his brother. It's clearly making him very uncomfortable. It's clearly making him tap into his own feelings, whatever he may be feeling about Logan and his death. That when he gets up there, it's very hard for him to even get up there, maintain composure. Again, like you said, he could hardly just say those words like "my father, Logan Roy." And then we could just see that he's just going to break, and he did. I liked that his siblings went up to help him. I thought that was just something comforting, right? Like, even if they are like fighting with each other and stabbing each other in the back, that they were still able, I guess, to go try to console him. And when he broke down and he was asking, is Logan in that casket, and like, can we get him out? Like, you could really see the emotion on his face, hear it in his voice. You could also see it in Shiv's face, how it was affecting her. So great great breakdown, Roman. Like, that's definitely what I was looking for, because we finally got to see some real emotion from him, right? We saw a little bit of it when they were on their, the company retreat with Matsson and his team. Like, he went off on Matsson, and you could tell that there was a lot still there, but this like really helped us see like everything that I guess Roman is feeling about that, right? Like, he hadn't really pre-grieved. Like, the grief is still here, and it's going to be here for a while. And I think if you try to keep covering that up with jokes like Roman does, you're not going to be able to process the grief in a positive way. And like, we're seeing what the results are right now.
Yeah, it's a good point about the grief. I also wonder, is he just not meant for the spotlight? Like, Kendall is a front man. He wants to be the front man. He likes the spotlight. Whereas it seems like Roman, that's not his best, best use. And coupled that with, also, you're right, he was trying to mask his feelings with, oh yeah, with all these jokes and, oh yeah, I'm fine, I pre-grieved and everything like that. And it's like, then he just completely breaks down, falls apart, can barely put a sentence together before he kind of begs off and lets, Kendall has to step up and, deliver a pretty good impromptu eulogy about his dad and kind of counterpoint what you had said. So, yeah, it was tough watching Roman like that. And then, like you said, the part where he's like, he goes down to the casket and he's like, is he in there? Meaning his dad. And he's like, can we get him out? And you're just like, do you not understand like what's going on? Like, like you're always the guy who's cracking wise and making fun of people, but then it's like, the reality of the world is like just too much for you to kind of comprehend, I guess.
Yeah, and I think, I mean, not only did everybody at the funeral just kind of see what Roman is going through, I think it showed Mencken that, like, this is a guy who I'm in league with, but like, maybe I don't want to be, like, maybe he's not cut out for it. Yeah. And I think it was a great opportunity for Kendall when he was able to be composed and get up there and give an impromptu speech. He tapped into, again, like his showman skills, but also I think Roman might be able to see like, oh, Kendall may be able to pull it off. He may be able to get people on his side. He may be able to lead. He may be able to get people to feel confident about him. So I don't think the implications are just about how they looked at the funeral. It's like, can you lead this business? Can you be the CEO? Do you have what it takes? Do you have the emotional fortitude?
Yeah, you're right. Kendall definitely, by stepping up again, Macon definitely noticed that. Afterwards, he said, like that was perfect or whatever, like, congratulated him on him. And you could tell Kendall definitely emerged as the leader, especially in that scenario. And for the speech, while we're talking about it, Kendall basically said, he basically just called his dad tough. He said, like a lot of what Ewan said was true, but he also said, like, look, like his dad was someone who built things and he was a man of action and he made life happen. And he said that, his dad was comfortable with the world that he created and that ultimately his legacy was his money. Like the money obviously was kind of the elephant in the room and he didn't shy away from that. He was like, look, this guy made a lot of money. So that's why all these people are in this room. That's why you're having this big fancy funeral, because this guy, generated a lot of wealth. So I thought it was like, it wasn't the most lovey-dovey kind of thing, but neither was his dad, so I think it was a good way for Kendall to kind of say goodbye to his dad. But as far as let's see, we got a comment here from Roosby here. Agree, Kendall is comfortable on stage, horrible one-on-one. Yeah, he's not the best one-on-one, but you put a spotlight on the dude, he definitely shines.
And this was after he was terrible one-on-one in this episode earlier with Rava, and then maybe like 15 minutes later with Jess. Like he was horrible at that. So
yeah, let's get into that. So like you said, Rava, his ex-wife, she calls him at the beginning of the episode and says, look, like we're not going to the funeral. I'm getting the kids out of here. We're going upstate because she's afraid of what's happening with the protests because of Macon being declared the winner of the election. So she's out. And of course, Kendall has his driver like immediately go to her place, like park in front of her driver's car. And he's, basically trying to force her to go to the funeral. And, he even like in like classic Kendall, he's like, he tells her that he'll go to court to get an emergency order to stop her from leaving the city. And she's like, yeah, just do that. Go do that. Like, like he's always got to try to like one up somebody or go, big time them. And you really just see, it's like we said, he's really good in front of an audience, but interpersonal stuff, he's just terrible. And
I mean, can you imagine having to co-parent with Kendall? That is insane. And he showed how much like Logan he can be, right? Like threatening to take the kids away from Rava, threatening to sue for custody. That's pretty much what Logan did. He was able to keep his kids, and then Caroline had to, move back to England. So lots of parallels between Kendall and Logan.
Yeah, definitely. And to talk about Jess, like while he's trying to talk about, getting custody, he's telling Jess, because Jess is his loyal assistant. She does everything for him. And, while he's trying to schedule a custody meeting or to talk about custody, he notices that she's got a meeting on his calendar. And he's like, what's this meeting all about? And she's like, oh, we'll get to it next week or whatever. And then he kind of like forces her to tell her what the meeting is about. And she's basically taking another job. She's leaving. And he does not like it. He basically tells her that, he calls her juvenile, calls her dumb. He's like, everyone's being so dumb. And, I mean, with her job, as we've talked about before, she's got to like do everything at a moment's notice. So you can definitely see why she would want to move on to something else, anything else, honestly.
Anything else.
Yeah.
Yeah. Not Kendall's most shining moment. And obviously, hopefully he can self-reflect later and be like, oh, maybe this is why like she was looking for another opportunity, because when she tried to give her notice, I demeaned her and I was an asshole. And, I told her she was being juvenile and all of these things. So, kudos to her for making a decision for herself and then for being composed when he was just kind of talking all that smack about her. All she said was like, well, like, I'm sad that you feel that way, Kendall. Like, she didn't apologize because she didn't have anything to apologize for. So, uh, I think Kendall is just kind of maybe showing a little bit of his true colors, right? Like, he can try to be like the good guy and be a good guy, but he can also be an asshole.
Yeah. Yeah. There's no question about that. And it's like I mentioned before that going into the funeral, Roman was sky high and he leaves very low. Whereas conversely, Kendall is pretty low as he's going to the funeral. And then after his eulogy performance, he's back on top, or, as high up as he can be given the circumstances of everything and what's obviously going to come. So yeah, this is a good point here by Roosby. He seems to be virtually blind to the other person's point of view. Yeah, totally agree with that. He has a singular focus, and that's why he wants to be the king, like he said in previous episode. One head, one crown. So Kendall's gunning for that number one spot. So let's talk a little bit about after the funeral, or toward the end of the funeral, basically, after Kendall's given the speech, he learns from Hugo, who we'll talk about Hugo more in a little bit. Hugo's his dog, literally, it seems like. Hugo has learned of Shiv's plan to basically, in a method to placate Minkin. She's offered to Matsson that hey, make Shiv the American CEO of the company, and then Minkin might not want to block the deal. Let's make this work out for him because he's a pro America. Obviously very very much pro American. At least publicly he is. I don't know about privately, but so to placate that, they're going to try to sell him on this idea of yes, you do have this Swedish billionaire who's buying this legacy media company, but one of legacy media companies, the founder's daughter is going to be the American CEO of the company. So it's kind of a good way to make it work. What did you think about, first of all, Shiv pitching that? And then when Kendall found out, you could definitely see in his face how he's at the funeral and he just goes back to, wow, we're right back to, positioning. It's always about positioning.
Yeah, I mean, he's had a terrible morning. His run-ins with Rava, his run-in with Jess. Then they kind of have like a nice-ish moment in the car when, Shiv tells him she's pregnant and they're like, oh, well, like, congratulations. You can kind of tell like maybe he feels happy for her, I guess, in his own weird Kendall way. But again, like once Hugo tells him all that, again, he's back to like fucking shit. Like she's making all these plays. So I think that really adds more layers to the complexity of everything that they were feeling during the funeral. And I feel bad for Kendall sometimes, and then I kind of don't. I think he tries to trust people and then like they stab him in the back, or so he feels like they do. So then he's got to, I guess, like come back harder at them. If he could just like tap into just being like a better guy, like a good guy, like it seems like he wants to be, I think like everybody could just be happier. But every time I want to root for Kendall, I'm like, damn it, Kendall, you like messed it up again. Just because not everything is like wanting to stab you in the back. Some people are just going to try to make their moves just to get themselves on top.
Yeah. And I think, the part about wanting to be a nice guy, it's like, I think he wants to be, but then I think he also thinks like dad was never a nice guy.
Right.
And he wants to be his dad. That's who he's basically becoming in this episode, and what he's kind of always wanted to be, even though he didn't really like the guy. So, it's interesting how that's kind of playing out. Let's just kind of wrap up Roman's storyline before we get on to like Shiv and back to Kendall. So, at the end, after it's all over, Kendall basically tells Roman, like, look, I need your help here because, your partnership with your pal Minkin isn't going to work out. Shiv's, she's pitched this idea to Matsson, who's pitched it to Minkin, and looks like that's going to be their play. And that's probably going to be what's going to screw us here.
Mm-hmm.
And Kendall tells Roman, he's like, look, you fucked the deal. Like you fucked the deal. And like Roman is like, doesn't believe it, but Kendall sells him. He's like, look, like, you thought you were dad, you tried to dad it, and now you fucked it. And he's like, I take responsibility because I agreed to it also, but you messed this up. And you could see Roman kind of like in real time, just like, oh yeah, you're right. This guy, we gave this guy power. We crowned this guy as president, and yeah, he immediately screws us over right away. He doesn't, he has no, and at this point, it's not like ATN can go and like take it back. They can't go, well,
never mind.
Yeah, we called Wisconsin for him, but you know what? I think we should actually let the votes be counted and let it all play out. Like, I mean, I guess potentially they could do that, but that would be unprecedented and would certainly like not please their viewers. So, what did you think about Kendall basically getting on Roman and being like, look, you fucked the deal?
Very Logan Roy. Again, like Kendall's just showing us how much like his dad he truly is. And I think Logan kind of knew that Kendall was the one to be, the potential one to be like him. But again, like way to kick him when he's down, that like further degrades his confidence. And I think Roman was literally gobsmacked. He couldn't believe that Shiv, I guess, had, once again outsmarted them, or that he couldn't trust Mencken. But listen, I don't care like what party you are, Republican, Democrat, whatever. Like if you're in a position of power, like you're probably going to screw people over. And I don't think Roman should have been that shocked that, oh no, like we can't trust Mencken. Like maybe Mencken's making deals with Shiv. What is happening? Like, duh, what else did you expect? So I think next episode, we're going to see a Roman that is just not very confident in everything. So maybe he's going to be just very paranoid about everything. So I really want to see that as well. Just kind of like what that does more to his psyche. And does that contribute more to like a bigger breakdown that Roman may have? Like he may decide to say, like, fuck everything. I'm just going to like quit everything and just go off and do something else because this is insane.
Yeah, like after Kendall kind of gets on him and basically reprimands him for what happened, Roman is like, he's overwhelmed with what happened in the funeral. He's ashamed with, basically letting this deal with Mencken backfire. And as the episode ends, he decides to walk, like he walks into a crowd of rioters and he gets beaten up. And honestly, like as this is happening, you think that like, honestly, I was like, I can't believe he got off that lightly, because all that happened to him, he got elbowed and knocked down a couple of times, but he was going right toward these people. He's telling them, like, calling them idiots and morons and stuff like that. And it's like, dude, you're like, you're 5 feet maybe, and like you're, like they're gonna beat you up. I thought he was gonna get like brutally beaten up. I was like, honestly, when I was watching, I was like, is this where is he gonna die? Like, wouldn't that be crazy if the end of Roman Roy is at a riot? Like, because of a president that he crowned who now has stabbed him in the back. I mean, it was such a crazy ending. What did you think about how Roman reacted going after the rioters and what he got from that?
That would have been very Shakespearean if that's what happened, right? Like they did end up killing him. No, I think it was true to form, I think, from what we've seen from Roman, just kind of like being explosive when he is pushed to that breaking point. And I like what I think Ruby is this person's name. Thank you so much for joining us. Yes, that he's so brutal. He's just finishing Roman off. So like Roman's going to do what I think he believes is going to get like himself like back up, which is like, I'm just going to go out and I'm going to yell at some other people. Just like somebody's like denigrating me and like making me feel bad. Like I'm going to go yell at other people and maybe like try to get some power from that. Right. But of course he's not going to get any power from that. Because like even if you do get some power just from yelling at other people, like it doesn't last long. It's not true power. So it was good that like they just kind of knocked him down to size. Like you said, they were just like, they pushed him down. He was kind of like in the fetal position on the ground, shielding himself. And just so you can tell how angry he is, he's at a very, very low point. So I'm hoping that nothing drastic happens with Roman. And I think if it does, then like Kendall might blame himself because he's going to feel like he's the one that pushed him over the edge.
That's really interesting because if you watch the look ahead to the finale, there's a lot going on. Obviously, like I said, it's going to be a 90-minute episode. There's a lot of jockeying now. It seems like it's going to be kind of Team Kendall versus Team Shiv, or the Roy Boys versus Shiv the Shiv, as Kendall said. But that would be really interesting if Roman commits suicide, or I don't know what he would do because of what happened. I don't know. I don't really see that coming necessarily, but I don't know. I mean, this show, there will be some kind of major thing happen at the end. There just has to be. Like and it won't be a good thing. And like I said, I think the show is going to end up with it just being as big of a mess as it was when it began. Just, someone else is in charge, but it's still the same mess. Speaking of being in charge, so Kendall, he's taken charge, and he's got his lapdog next to him, Hugo. Hugo had a great episode. I really enjoyed Hugo in this episode. So after the gravesite, and we're going to get more into that in a little bit also, but at the gravesite, he talks to Hugo, and he starts telling him, like, hey, we want to, let's go to the media. Let's kill this deal. And I like Hugo. He's like, I am the droid you're looking for. And then after telling Hugo what to do, basically telling him, like, hey, go to the media, tell them that, hey, the family, key members of the family are not supporting the Matsson deal. The board is souring on the deal. Like, let's go after him. Let's kill this deal. And then Kendall says, life isn't nice. It's contingent. People who say they love you also fuck you. So this is an explicit plan to fuck the deal. And he's like, me, I'll rule the world and you can come. But it won't be a collaboration. You'll be my dog, but the scraps from the table will be millions. You happy? And Hugo goes, woof, woof. Like, that was, I laughed so hard. Like, Hugo and Kendall, that was such a great scene because Hugo's just happy to do anything, and not bad scraps if you're getting millions of dollars to do whatever you have to do. What did you think about Hugo in this episode?
Definitely is. I mean, he's worse than Tom for sure when it comes to just kind of bootlicking and doing whatever it takes to, I guess, like, be in the good graces of whoever is in power. But there's still that pesky little issue of like the insider trading with his daughter. So
yeah,
I guess maybe he's like, I need to line myself with Kendall to, for him to help me. But I don't know, how is Kendall going to help him if that does come out, right? Like, we don't know. But like, Hugo is definitely just a lapdog.
Yeah. He's a funny lapdog, though. I really enjoy it.
Hilarious.
He doesn't have a whole lot of screen time, but whenever he is on the screen, he makes use of it, and he's usually very funny. So I'm going to miss that character going, after the finale, obviously. So we also see in this episode where Kendall recruits Colin, his dad's former bodyguard. Remember, his dad's best pal, as we learned in I think it was episode 1 of the season, or episode 2.
One of those, yeah.
Yeah, one of those episodes. Yeah. He basically, tells Colin, hey, come work for me, talk to me, we'll make this work. And Colin seems to agree. And so, Marcy, my question for you, do you think that Kendall is trying to get Colin back, not only because he wants to, like, literally be his dad and Colin was his dad's bodyguard, but is he getting Colin back because Colin knows about the waiter he killed in season 1? What do you think?
Yes, because I think he knows that Colin knows a lot, not just about that, but, when he approached him, it was under the guise of, like, how are you really doing? And you're like, oh, like, Kendall, like, actually cares about how he's doing. And then he's like, I heard you've been talking to someone, right? Like, getting mental health advice, going to a therapist. So you're like, okay, like, great, Kendall, like, you really care about how he's doing. But then obviously it comes out, like, by the way he's saying it, that, I hear you've been talking to someone, which I interpreted to mean, like, maybe you know a lot of stuff and you need to talk to somebody about it. So I don't want you talking to anybody else about it. So why don't you come and work for me? and talk to me about it. That way you can't talk about whatever, you may feel like you need to get off your chest. So I definitely don't think that offer was just like from Kendall's heart or just because he wants to feel more like Logan. I definitely think it is because he feels he needs to keep him close so he's not out running his mouth about all of the weird stuff, bad stuff, illegal stuff that he probably knows about the family.
Yeah. Well, yeah, you're right. Colin has seen and done a lot of things. He is definitely in that world, and it does behoove Kendall to keep him closer to him than further away. So that makes sense. I did like when Kendall tried to talk to Mencken after the funeral, and right away he gets, Mencken's basically, yeah, Mencken's blowing him off and basically saying that, yeah, I'll try to help, but and immediately Kendall realizes like he's not going to help us.
Yeah.
And then I did like how when Mencken then sees Roman after Roman broke down at the funeral, Mencken he calls Roman the Grim Weeper and Tiny Tears, which, Kendall, sticks up for his little brother. He's like, hey, not today. Like, like it is kind of funny to see these people where even though they're backstabbing their family members, it is one of those things where like I can talk to my brother that way, but you can't. That's definitely what you get out of that. And I don't know. And then my final thing on Kendall I want to mention, I like how he called Shiv super mom whenever he was like talking to he was talking to Roman. He's like, hey, did you hear about Supermom's plan to be the US CEO for the company? So I did enjoy that. But speaking of Supermom, let's talk about Shiv. Let's talk about her arc in this episode. So it starts out, she's giving Matsson advice on, hey, you need to get your bogus subscriber numbers out right now because given what's happened in this country right now with the protests and Mencken being declared the winner, this is the perfect day to bury bad news. Get it out there. No one's going to see it, or a few people are going to see it, and then we're going to move on. And, Matsson, he still doesn't want to do that. Like in the beginning, he doesn't want to do that. What did you think about her? Like, I mean, honestly, to me, that's a smart media play by Shiv. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I think Matsson knows that what she's saying is smart and he should listen to it. But I think also like just a part of him just doesn't want to listen because he feels like he's so important or whatever. But she's going full steam with like the whole, like, I'm going to give you advice and like hopefully install myself as the CEO because I like am advising you or whatever. So I think she thinks it's a good play. I don't think it's going to work out for her though. I definitely don't.
Yeah, I mean, this was an episode where it looked like she was kind of, getting back to where she's a viable option to, take over the company. But I agree with you. I don't think it's going to work out also. I don't think it's going to work out for anybody, honestly. Like, I think they're all going to lose in a certain way. Obviously it'll be a very creative way to make them all kind of suffer. But yeah, she thinks that she's like outsmarted everybody, and I don't know. We'll
Like
see how that plays out.
She thinks she's hot shit, but Matsson didn't really seem cool with the whole she's pregnant thing, right? Like he's thinking like she's gonna like need some time off and like maternity leave and all of these things, and she's trying to reassure him like, no, it's gonna be cool, but I mean, you never know. And I think that I don't think he was already 100% on board with like her having like a very prominent role in the company, like after he bought it. And I think that kind of further added to, yeah, I definitely don't want you to have like a very prominent role. Like you're helpful for now, but I'm going to end up screwing you over.
Yeah. Much like Mencken did to Kendall and Roman. It's they're all getting played. It's so funny how that's working out. But as you mentioned, so Matsson finds out that she's pregnant. One person who didn't have to be told she was pregnant was her mother, Caroline, who, after seeing Shiv for 5 seconds, notices right away she's pregnant. I did like how before the mom got there, Kendall notices her, and then Shiv's line was great. She's like, I thought I could hear Dalmatians howling somewhere.
Yeah.
So that was a great line. What do you think about the mother to be interaction between Caroline and Shiv in this episode?
Very uncomfortable, which is great because that's what it's supposed to come off as, right? Like, and I think, moms know whether like they're a mom that's in your life a lot or like Shiv's mom, like mom that can really care less. But
Yeah.
I mean, I think she was like, yeah, like I definitely know what's going on here. Like maybe everybody else didn't know or like they pretended that they didn't know, but hey, like, why didn't you tell me what's going on here? And then her kind of like reaction was great because it wasn't like a happy reaction, an excited reaction. It was just kind of like oh, like, okay, you're pregnant. Well, okay, like, great. Like, what's going to happen? And it was just so uncomfortable to watch, um, which was perfect because that's just the type of mom she is, right? Like, she's not a very caring and coddling mother. Um, so, like, why did we expect her to all of a sudden be like, oh, Shiv, I'm so excited. You're pregnant. I'm going to be your grandmother. She's just kind of like, okay.
Yeah, her mom is definitely not not motherly. You can tell she does not care. And later on in the episode, whenever Tom finally does arrive after the funeral, and Caroline sees them and she comes up to them, she's like, "Oh, the happy couple." She says congratulations to Tom, and Tom's like, "Well, if it wasn't a total fucking disaster, it would be a dream come true." So I did like how blunt Tom was in the episode.
Which I'm sure is great to hear if you are the pregnant woman in this whole
Right.
disaster, right? Like, first my mom like isn't excited about it, and then Tom says everything's a big fucking disaster. Like, this is great. Like, I'm so thrilled to be in this situation.
Yeah, but just before the Caroline comes over to talk to them, you see Tom and Shiv have a moment where Shiv's basically calling out Tom for not being at the funeral, and she's like, you would never have dared to not come to my dad's funeral when he was alive. And Tom was like, well, the thing about your dad is he's lost quite a bit of influence over the past few days. Like, I guess being dead would do that.
A little bit.
But then the next thing that happens with the two, though, I thought was interesting. I want to get your take on that. They're at this party or this, I guess, reception, and waiter comes by, or Shiv grabs a glass of champagne, looks like some kind of alcohol. She drinks it in front of Tom. Tom obviously notices that. What did you read from that situation or from that moment?
For me, like, it came off like Shiv wanted to portray maybe like she didn't really care if she was putting like the baby in danger, or she's being very nonchalant about it. Which I don't know why she's doing that. Like, why are you still playing games? Like,
right.
Stop. You are old enough to not be playing these stupid games. But I think also what Tom said was really interesting when they were talking about Logan and not going to the funeral was, it's like, well, I was there like right after it happened, so I was able to say goodbye. And I don't know, again, if that was kind of like a dig at Shiv because she wasn't able to be there and she was the last one that they handed the phone to. So by that time, like, he was already gone. I didn't know at first if he was just trying to like rub more salt in Shiv's wound by saying that, or if it was him just kind of consoling himself and making himself feel better. Like, okay, I'm sad he's gone. I'm upset I wasn't able to go to his funeral, but at least I was able to be there in the end and just kind of say goodbye. So I didn't really know what to make of that. So both of them, I'm just kind of over like their games. Just say how you feel and stop just kind of like taking these digs at each other.
Yeah, I agree with you. I thought at first it was going to be a dig, but I think you're right. I think it was because he's trying to show her that it is an emotional thing for him too. Like he's saying like, look, I wasn't at the funeral, but I was there when he died. And because like then Tom like breaks down, and it's not like he's like acting or trying to
Right.
it's not a joke to him. So I do think he was trying to express to her like, hey, your dad was important to me too, and
Right.
today was a crazy day given what's happening in the world, and obviously his job is very much up in the air, and I guess I don't know, I think he thought it was like a safe haven though. I think like staying at work, he probably thought was the better move than actually going to the funeral, I guess. I don't know. I can't get inside the guy's head, but it seems like that's what he's trying to like kind of hide from the funeral and from all that's happening there. I don't know. What do you think about that? You think he stayed at work to hide, or was there some other reason?
I think it's a bit of both. It could be like, again, that he was trying to hide, maybe didn't want to deal with his emotions. Maybe he knew that going to the funeral would be really difficult for him. But again, like it's the day after the election that they called that they maybe weren't supposed to call. Like people are angry. There are protests. There's probably going to be like some kind of legal ramifications that come of this. There was a whole story in the newspaper about it. And he was just kind of feeling, I guess, happy because they didn't really seem to mention him a lot, right? It was a lot of other players who had a hand in making that call, but it didn't really talk about him. So I think part of it was like maybe he felt better just staying at work and not having to tap into those sad emotions at the funeral. Um, but also I think it just goes back to if I'm at work, then that shows that I'm really dedicated and like maybe somebody will see this and like I'll finally be able to be on top. So who knows? It could have been like, different motives as to why he felt his time was better spent staying at work than going to the funeral.
And he did send Greg in his proxy to kind of be like, hey, make
There
sure
you
to
go.
tell Mencken that I helped crown him. Like I made the
Right.
call. And he kind of kept reinforcing that to tell, but then you notice once Greg knows that Tom's not going to be there, Greg starts playing for himself, which,
Yep.
going into the finale, if you look at the characters on the board, Greg is the one who's in the middle of both sides. He's open, like he has access to Matsson.
Yeah.
Matsson like has no problem talking to him.
Yeah.
He's obviously still in with Kendall. He's on both sides, and it seems like no one cares because he's just kind of like the dumb cousin Greg. But like, I feel like he's going to have a big role to play in the finale. I'm not saying he's going to be the one who's running Waystar Royco at the end of this. I don't believe that, but I do think that something he'll do something major in the finale that will impact all the characters, or certainly whoever comes out on top in this battle for the company.
Absolutely. I mean, I've read things that say like he might be the one on top because like he's been able to get Matsson to stop making fun of him and now kind of like be in his circle a little bit after like I guess their drunken night full of debauchery. And even Matsson looked excited to see him at the funeral, right? Like he's like, oh,
Yeah.
hey there. I think he said, hey there, sexy today. Like,
Yeah, he did.
imagine that. Okay, like, so it's like, okay, like maybe Matsson is like, trusting you, or at least he's humored by you. So Greg is really good about being duplicitous in a way that isn't very obvious, or it's overly obvious so that everybody just kind of writes it off, but they don't really see like how skilled he is at it.
Right.
They just kind of like write him off, like you said, as like the dumb, goofy cousin, but could just be part of his act.
Yeah, he's non-threatening on the outside, but he might be a threat to
Yeah.
take over the company. I don't think he's going to take over, but now that you said that, that would be really interesting if Matsson decided that, yeah, I do need an American CEO, and his name is Gregory Hirsch. That would be that would be crazy.
With all of his years of experience working at a theme park and, being Tom's Gregging for Tom.
Gregging, yeah.
Yeah, I definitely don't think that Matsson thinks Shiv could be the American CEO because he knows that like Shiv can't just be his puppet. She's not just going to let him do whatever he wants through her. So he needs somebody like a Tom, like a Greg, that
Yeah.
he can, like a Hugo, that he can just kind of like
Yeah.
maneuver.
Yeah, that's a really good point. I hadn't thought about that necessarily. So wow, that's pretty good. Like that would be a shocking way to end the show for Greg to emerge. I mean, this episode or this season, you definitely can see him kind of weaving his way in there. But I mean, he's still a dark horse in my mind. But that would be really entertaining if we see Greg rise to the top. That'd be fun to see. Um, Kind of finishing up on Shiv's arc in this story or in this episode. I want to talk a little bit about her eulogy because after Kendall gave his, kind of save the day for Roman eulogy, it was Shiv's turn to go up there, and she kind of wanted to. I think she wanted to get her voice out there, but I think she thought that Kendall didn't totally nail it. But then then she got up there and she was kind of the same. Everyone who spoke about Logan was pretty true. They were saying stuff like, he was he was a hard person to love. He wouldn't let you in. He was tough. And, she said like, when my dad would let you in, the light was warm, but it was hard to be his daughter. He was hard on women. And then she kind of looked at the casket and she said, you did okay, Dad. And then she said, goodbye, my dear, dear world of a father, which is a very like strange way to say it, but also it gave him like this gravitas, I guess, which, he was a titan of industry, but also he was, as far as a person and as far as a father, he was pretty, absent for most of their life or wasn't very much involved. Certainly didn't enjoy being around the kids very often. What did you think of Shiv's eulogy and kind of her final words to her dad publicly?
I'm glad she was able to get up there and just kind of speak about it because it is like giving into vulnerability, right? Like she was able to do it and Kendall were able to do it. Like it's hard to put yourself out there and kind of like personify your grief and let other people see it. So I'm glad she was able to do that. And again, speak her truth, right? Like he wasn't a very easy dad to love. It was hard being his daughter. I like how she talked about how he was hard on women, like he couldn't really understand the concept of a full woman. And yeah, like we have here a comment. Yeah, I definitely think Marcia was moved by Shiv's eulogy. I think maybe even her mom was moved by it because they also understood, right? Like he could be hard on women, that when he loves you, you think you are like the center of the universe and like the sun is very warm, but that doesn't last forever. And then, eventually that warmth goes elsewhere. So I definitely thought that it kind of was very true for her, but also for the women in Logan's life. I also like how the camera panned to Jerry and to Carolina when she talked about how Logan was hard on women, because it wasn't just his family members that he was hard on. It was also the women who worked for him, who were very competent women. But again, like she said, he didn't really understand like the full concept of like a woman, right? Like women can be all of these things and they can be strong and they can be competent and they can be, all of these things. I don't think that he maybe realized that, partially because of who he was, but also partially he was an older man. Like people of previous generations, it's really hard for them when there are women that like are very strong in their power and are able to just kind of be like women like Shiv and like Jerry and Carolina. So I liked her speech. I definitely could relate to parts of it, just from people in my life that, that kind of reminded me of. So, yeah, it was a really great speech. And I like that you could see how moved Marcia was by it. And it just broke my heart when she went up to Shiv afterward and she's like, yeah, like I really liked your speech. Like I loved your dad very dearly, because I don't think that's anything that the kids really thought. Like I don't think they thought that Marcia really did love him. But then she said like he broke our hearts, which was true, right? Like everybody tried to love him in their own way, but wasn't able to accept that love or wasn't able to reciprocate it, or maybe he just felt uncomfortable by getting it because he'd never gotten it as a kid. So for whatever reason, like, they had their hearts broken by somebody that they were just trying to love, which I think was great for them to insert that part with Marcia as well.
Yeah, and I think they probably thought that Marcia and people like Carrie and everybody in his life were just, positioning themselves for money, much like what the siblings
Right.
are doing also. So
Yeah.
it was always a big game of who can get close to this guy for his power and his money. Like Kendall
Right.
talked about his money being his lasting legacy. So yeah, no, I think that, like I said, all the eulogies that we heard were great. I think they all were pretty fair, pretty even with
Yeah.
Logan. He was not a lovable person. He just wasn't. You know, that's the way some people are. Not everyone's great. Not everybody's like
Yeah.
an awesome person. So it's good that they didn't try to portray him like that, because
Yeah.
that wasn't the case by any means. Um, so something else I wanted to touch on with Shiv is when Shiv talks with Matson and Mencken together, and she kind of sets up their little meeting at the reception afterwards. And that's when Matson pitches the American CEO idea to Mencken, saying,
Mhm.
hey, like I'm not going to be here. I don't want to be in the middle of this. I need somebody here who could. And Mencken figures that right away, and he knows, like, obviously Shiv and him are politically opposite. Like, they're not on the same side.
Mhm.
And I do think it's interesting how she, the last episode, she said that, Mencken is the end of the world if he's, elected. And now, to make it work in her favor, now she's got to pitch it as well. It doesn't really matter what I think. Our
Right.
audience loves Jared, and I respect our audience. And,
Yeah.
just like Kendall, just like Roman to lesser degree, because he doesn't have maybe the finesse to kind of figure out, you know, the right thing to say. But much like Kendall, Shiv's just trying to do whatever it takes to put herself in the best position.
Mhm. Yeah, and Mencken could see right through that. Um, so I don't think he really believes that if she is selected as the American CEO, they would be able to kind of work together. Um, I don't even think Shiv really probably deep down believes it. I think she feels very strongly about Mencken and about like what they did to, I guess announce him as the president elect. So she was just kind of talking out of her ass and just kind of bullshitting him to set herself up for this position. But I think people can see right through her, and I don't think Mattson's buying it. And when he called Shiv and was like, yeah, like, no, it's a go. It's probably a go. I think Mencken's on board with the American CEO.
Yeah.
I don't think Mattson was alone in his vehicle. I think there was somebody else in his vehicle with him that maybe had struck some kind of a deal with him to have themselves be the American CEO. Like somebody Mattson feels like he could be a puppet master too. And I think Shiv's going to get pushed out.
Well, that's interesting. So, do you think it was Greg?
I don't know. At first, I thought it could have been Tom, but then I think we see Tom later. So I was like, oh, I don't think it's Tom. Could have been Greg. Could have just been any of like these little backstabbers that just want to. No, at first, excuse me. First, I thought it was Roman, but then we see Roman still at the wake with. That's when Kendall kind of like, stomps on him basically.
Yeah.
So I was like, okay, it can't be Roman. I don't think we saw Tom after that. So it could have been Tom, it could have been Greg, could have been anybody else.
Yeah.
I'm excited to see what happens.
Yeah. The more you talk about it, the Greg idea really would be a really awesome way to end the show. And
It would be a great way to piss a lot of people off. I mean,
yeah.
and I would just think it would be hilarious. I don't really think that might be what happens. I really don't think he's the one that ends up on top, but I definitely think he is like adjacent to that. I don't think he kind of loses any stature.
No, I agree. Like I said, I think he's going to do something that has a huge impact on, whoever comes out on top, takes over the company or whatever. I think I think Greg's going to be a big player in the finale. Before we get out of here, let's talk about, so Logan has a mausoleum we find
Yeah.
out that he bought it at an auction for $5 million because, as Connor said, I didn't think Dad wanted to go in the ground, and so he decided he's going to buy this mausoleum. He got it for $5 million at auction. I like how Kendall's like, $5 mil, good deal, and it's like these people are so crazy rich. It's just like it's so stupid that like 5 million is like nothing to them, but it is nothing. But no, I love how like then like they're in the mausoleum, they're looking like there's some open spaces in there, and Connor, he looks at, he's like, hey, he's like, I'll have to talk to Will about this, but I was always crazy for cryogenics, but he's like, yeah, I wouldn't say no to a top bunk. So maybe Connor's angling again. Even still, as the guy's dead, they're trying to position each other. Now, it doesn't seem like the other three siblings are too keen on the idea. Kendall says, "Look, I could barely like get through sharing a scotch with the guy," and Roman seems pretty overwhelmed by everything, and he actually kind of storms off to sit in the limo. But what did you think about the mausoleum part of it? Because I wasn't expecting that, but that makes a lot of sense with someone that crazy wealthy.
I wasn't either, but then yeah, again, it kind of shows just kind of the wealth, because when I think of mausoleums, it is people that are either already very wealthy, or like somebody a long time ago was wealthy in their family and like bought all the spots in the mausoleum. And if you're buried in one now, it's because somebody like 100 years ago thought like, I'm just going to buy all of these plots in this mausoleum for like my descendants. So it does feel very like old money-ish to like just be entombed in a mausoleum. But I kind of feel the same way as Logan, right? Like, yeah, don't put me in the ground, like maybe put me in like this nice little mausoleum. Or like Connor, like let's look into cryogenics, that could be interesting. Being shot into space could also be interesting. Like I am down for like creative ways to kind of like leave our body in creative ways rather than just being buried or being cremated.
Yeah, or you could be frozen, then like maybe reanimated in the future whenever they figure out whatever might have
Anything
caused
is
your demise.
possible.
Right. Maybe we'll be like Terminators or cyborgs or something. Who knows? Like, just a little piece of you sticks around so you can live forever.
That would be great.
I did think it was kind of interesting how, after going to the mausoleum, you see Shiv and she goes to Frank and Carl, and she kind of like is like fishing for like, tell me my dad wasn't the worst person,
Yeah.
And that seems to be kind of a common theme with Logan, is they want to find somebody to say, yeah, your dad was awesome, and the best they can do is they go, you know what you saw with him is what you got. And again, that's a very fair comment. I mean, I think it's probably more than fair given just how he treated everybody and how he kind of lorded over this world that he helped create.
Absolutely more than fair. And I think Carl might have wanted to say a little bit more, but I think Frank is the one that was like, you know what, like she's had a hard day so far. Let's not ruin it a little bit more for her. But Carl is just kind of like shady, and I kind of like it. He was also making fun of Roman at the after the whole funeral and the whole ceremony at Shiv's house. So
Yep.
Just Carl is just waiting to get out of there. He's just waiting for his golden parachute to just be like, fuck off, everybody, I'm out. So I can't blame him.
Yeah, he's got an island to buy with his like brother-in-law or whatever he said, or his brother. Yeah, so. But that you're mentioning the part where the audio is circulating from Roman's speech of him crying, and they said Carl starts playing, or Carl starts playing it, and then Frank is like, he kind of stops him, and then even Jerry, who is briefly in this episode, you kind of see her compassion, even given what's happened with Roman. She's like, that's awful. Like, stop doing this, because obviously it was a moment where you really saw how him like dealing with his dad's death in real time, and how he was not prepared for that moment, and just the thought of not having his dad around anymore. That kind of hit him right there while he's on stage about to speak to 600 people in this fancy funeral home.
He had a moment where he was human, and I think
Yep.
Jerry was able to see that. Maybe she feels bad enough for him that she'll try to help him out in the last episode. Who knows? I think at this point anything is possible. So I'm like very excited to see like what kind of crazy stuff like goes down.
Yeah, and the last episode, if you're watching the preview for the finale, for the series finale, which I can't believe I'm saying that because this show, like, there's so much more I feel like they could do, but they're gonna wrap it up with a 90-minute series finale next week. It definitely seems like it's Kendall versus Shiv at this like final board, and apparently it's gonna get pretty nasty from the quotes and everything. Like Madsen's quoted, he says, we're gonna cut it close, we're gonna get close to the bone.
Mm-hmm.
We're gonna get right in there. It's gonna get nasty. So it sounds like it's gonna be pretty intense, and I can't wait. I honestly, we've talked about it quite a bit. I really still don't have a good handle on what is going to happen. I just don't have a good feel for how it's going to play out, and that's the makings of a great show. I mean, it's like it's a mystery up until the very end, and I feel confident, regardless of what they do, that we're going to come on this show next Monday and we're going to be like, wow, Succession, one of the greatest shows ever. Like, they stuck the landing, and this is an all-time show.
I hope so. I agree with you. I think they are going to be able to do it. Hopefully it won't be kind of like when Game of Thrones ended. A lot of people are like really pissed about that. I don't think that's what's going to happen here. I think something big will probably happen, but I think it will be something big that maybe we deep down had been expecting. I'm still thinking like maybe somebody else dies or we lose somebody else, like, but who knows? I mean, I think that might be a little bit overkill, like have two important people die in one season in a very short span, right? Because in Succession world, it's only been about a week and a half. But I definitely think there's going to be just kind of like some bombshells. I don't think we've also like read the will. Like maybe there's crazy stuff in the will. Like maybe we haven't seen the last of Carrie. So I'm just like ready for anything at this point. Like anything that pops up, I'd be like, oh, like great. Like, yes, I'm down for like this storyline and where he takes us.
Yeah, and given that it's going to be an hour and a half, and that would leave a lot of time, much like this previous episode, which was 73 minutes. Are there any characters that you think that we haven't seen lately that we're going to see in this episode? Or conversely, are there people like we saw Marcia, and it seems like Marcia kind of got a nice moment to be written off or write out in the sunset. Like I don't feel like we're going to see Marcia in the finale.
I don't think so. Or if we do, it's like a peripheral thing. Like she's just going to be in the background of something. I don't think like we'll see a lot of Marcia. Like,
although she does have a board seat,
that's
right?
true.
Yeah, so I guess, I don't know.
I definitely think maybe we'll see more of like Ewan, his brother. Somebody said like we need to see more of Greg's mom. Like we saw her in season 1, and then we like briefly saw her at the funeral, but like maybe she'll just come out of the woodwork again to see like what she can get for herself or for her, for her son. I can't think of anybody that we haven't seen in a while that might come back, but I'm wondering if the whole waiter thing comes back to bite Kendall in the ass. Who knows?
Yeah, I feel like that's got to happen, but I mean, if it doesn't this episode, it's never going to happen. So I feel like with Mattson saying, "Hey, we're going to cut to the bone. It's going to get nasty." Shiv knows about that. Roman knows about that. So there are a lot of people that know what happened. And if Kendall is trying to, make himself the king of Waystar Royco, one easy way to bring him down is for that story to come to light. So I don't know. I think what I don't know if is it Ruby or is it Rusby? Not sure if we appreciate you joining us.
I think it's Ruby, but
okay, I think it's Ruby. Okay, well, whatever the name, we really appreciate you joining us the last few weeks or several weeks and commenting. I think this is a great like final take about how this show always is able to shock you, but whatever happens seems inevitable, and that's totally true. Like it's so well written that whatever happens, it's exactly what was said. It's kind of like I've never seen a show like that where where they do that. Okay, so it is Ruby. Okay, well, I
Ruby.
apologize for the last 2 or 3 weeks mispronouncing your name. I wasn't sure exactly. That X kind of threw me off. I wasn't sure if it's like a French thing or something. Maybe it is, but I'm a dumb American, so that's which, hey, I could be the American CEO of Waystar Royco. I definitely can do that.
I mean, you've got my confidence. Like,
Yeah.
let's do it. Let's get you. I mean, you were better than like Greg at this point. So
at least like I could like run the podcasting division
there
or whatever,
you go.
right? Like Waystar Studios needs like a podcasting director or whatever. I can do that. So throw my hat in the ring. Why not? There's only one episode less. I've got to shoot my shot. So
totally on board. I love that, but yes, I'm waiting, and like Ruby said, like whatever comes out, it's going to feel inevitable, and it's not going to feel like, oh my gosh, I couldn't see this coming. This is so totally shocking, or like this is unbelievable for like a show. I think whatever they'll throw at us, we can be like, oh, like, yeah, like that makes sense that happened. So definitely very excited to see more breakdowns, more family drama, more shockers, and then maybe like a final fuck you in some way from Logan. Like, I think there's still like something else that'll come out that'll make people be like, damn it, like he really was an asshole.
Yeah, you know what? I think you're right about that. I think that would be a perfect way for that. I mean, the character was too big of a character to not have some kind of say, even though he's dead in the finale. One of the final things I want to touch on before we got out of here is this is just a funny line that happened in before the funeral got going. Matsson's there and Minkin's there, and they haven't been introduced. And Matsson is talking to Shiv, and he points over to Minkin. He says, "What are you thinking about the handsome Nazi over there?" He's like,
Yeah.
"You thinking he's going to win?" And he's like, "And if he does, like, ironically, would that be bad for a tall, blonde, white guy like Matsson?" I thought that was like, perfect, because obviously Matsson is like the perfect Aryan person that a Nazi would put on a pedestal. So
yeah, and I mean it's spot on, right? Like it happens in real life too. Like somebody ultra conservative gets elected, it doesn't have a lot of repercussions for people who look like Matsson or for people who have Matsson's money, because it's like, hey, I may not agree with his politics, but it doesn't really affect me because like I'm a tall blonde white guy.
So it'll be interesting to see next week what happens with the tall blonde white guy, if he actually gets to buy the company or not. I'm not rooting. I'll just say right now, I'm not really rooting for Matsson, but then again, it's hard to root for anybody. There's no.
Yeah.
I think Greg would be funny if he came out on top, but everyone else, I don't know. It's a real tough choice to pick a winner, but
Yeah.
really looking forward to it. And yeah, so it's been thought it was a great episode. Do you have any final thoughts before we get out of here?
No, just great. I didn't know a funeral episode could make me feel all types of different feelings, whether it's sadness and like just funny and all of these things. So like, no, it was great. It was a great episode.
Yeah, definitely was. So now you know what we think about the episode. We want to hear what you think about it. And one of the best ways you can do is just like what Ruby's done, is join us in the live chat. Let us know what you're thinking. Ruby actually has a thought here. I can root for Jerry. That's a good point.
Same.
I can root for Jerry too. And that's something else. Like, I just wonder how much of Jerry we're going to see. Like, she's going to be in the finale, but I wonder, like, at this point, how can they position her any more than what she just is, where she's a part of the old guard who's waiting to see what happens with the purchase of the company. So
maybe she's got her own kind of maneuvering that she's doing with Matsson. Like, you never know in the show. Like Ruby said, like,
you know what? What if it was Jerry in the car?
Yeah.
That would be awesome. Wow, I cannot wait for this episode. This is going to be one of the best episodes of TV. I can't wait. And we're going to talk about it next Monday, so definitely check us out. But But thanks again to Ruby for joining us for the live chat. Thanks to everyone else who's joined us in the past. We really appreciate it. And hey, if you're watching us now or later on YouTube, hey, do us a favor, hit that like button, subscribe to the channel. We really appreciate it, and it really helps us out. But also, we're also available on social media, so check us out there. You can find us on Facebook, LinkedIn. We're not on LinkedIn. Why would we be on LinkedIn?
No.
We could be. I don't know. Maybe I should be on LinkedIn looking for my my director of the podcast. But no, we're on Facebook, we're on Twitter, we're on Instagram, we're at Watchers Basement. Also, be sure to use the hashtag Watchers Basement, in your posts. We'll appreciate that. And if video is not your thing, that's okay. We're also available on audio platforms like Spotify, Google Podcasts, and Apple Podcasts. So check us out there and give us a 5-star rating. We really appreciate it. So that about does it. We will be back next week to talk about the series finale of Succession. I can't believe I'm saying that, but I am. The series finale of one of the best shows ever. But hey, this week, we're not done this week. We got another big podcast coming on Wednesday. And Marcy, I don't think you're going to be joining us for this one, but
unfortunately not.
Wednesday, we are going to be talking about Fast 10. That's right. Fast X, the latest installment in the Fast saga. My favorite franchise, maybe the most fun franchise. I love the Fast saga. So please, if you've seen the movie, please join us on Wednesday as we talk about Fast X. If you haven't seen Fast X, go see it right now after this podcast and just go to the theater, watch it, and get ready for a lot of fun on Wednesday when we break it down. I know Frank's going to be joining us. Frank is very excited for this movie. I think he liked this movie more than me, which I didn't know that was possible, but it's his energy is pretty high for this one. So that should be a great podcast. So join us on Wednesday. And of course, next Monday, we'll be talking about the finale of Succession. So until then, thanks to Marcy for helping me run this show today. And thanks to all you for watching and listening. We will see you next week. Have a good night. And good night. Bye-bye.